Hello, thanks for joining me for 2nd Samuel in Summer. Today is Wednesday, June 2nd, and we'll be looking at the second chapter of the second book of Samuel. The second chapter is not a short one. It's a it's a longer chapter, and we have a story. We have a tale to tell, a tale of battle. Their transfer of power from Saul's death to David. Now remember, David was anointed by Samuel many, many chapters ago in the book of First Samuel. However, David has yet to take the throne. But in this chapter, he is anointed the king of Judah, which is one section of all of Israel. And then in another part of Israel, where I guess the remainder of Israel that's not called Judah, the only living son of Saul is put up for king by Abner, the commander of Saul's army. So this guy's name is Ishbal, and he is the only living son of Saul, and is put up to be king. And what you'll see here is that he made him king over Gilead, the Asherites, Jezreel, Ephraim, Benjamin, and over all Israel. So they identify a couple of places by name and then just say all of Israel. And Asherites would be uh, Assyrians and would not be contextually appropriate here. So it may be instead of Ashurites with a U, it's Ashurites with an E, which would mean like Benjamites, like Gadites, like the descendants of the tribe of Asher, because that's one of the sons of Jacob. So it could be a typo because their Assyrians weren't on the scene yet, and it's not appropriate to talk about them yet, and they wouldn't have been under the guise of this supposed king of Israel anyway. So that's kind of a weird, quirky thing in there. And David was king in Hebron and in Judah, and so David's there in Hebron, and this other king, this is son of Saul, is anointed king over all the rest, and Abner and his servants are coming up against David and his servants. And these are soldiers who would have likely fought together on the same battlefield under Saul before David left Saul. And so you have a hesitancy to enter into battle while the generals, David and Abner, confer about what's going to happen here. However, the battle does ensue, and at least one member of a top household of each group is killed. So there is, sadness and death and grief. There, uh, there were three sons of Jeriah, and they were Joab, Abishai, and Asahel. And Asahel was a fast runner, and he pursued Abner. And so he's relentlessly pursuing Abner, not turning left or right, but relentlessly pursuing Abner. And here's where we know that there's some kind of relationship. He seems more like a comrade or a friendly, it's a friendly fire situation. This family, these brothers are loyal to David, and they're pursuing Abner because they feel like he is treacherous as putting Ishmael up, and then they had this fight. So he pursues Abner on foot, and he's so fast that when Abner tries to push him away with his spear, he runs him through with the blunt end of the spear. And it's described here like that. He fell there and died where he lay, and all those who came to the place where Asahel had fallen and died stood still. So remember, that leaves those two brothers, Joab and Abishai. they pursued Abner and took revenge for their brother on Abner. Uh, but the Benjamites rallied around Abner, so he has his own people, and as they pursue him, there is a battle. Abner calls out, can we just stop this fighting? And that's what you get the sense that, we know each other. We're fighting each other. We're on the same side here. But not really, because Abner had done this thing with Saul's son, and they are supporting King David. And so Abner calls out, how long will it be before you order your people to turn from this pursuit of their own kinsmen? And Joab said, as God lives, if you had not spoken, the people would have continued to pursue their kinsmen, not stopping till morning. And Joab sounded the trumpet, and all the people stopped. They no longer pursued Israel or engaged in battle any further. So there is a peace, a timeout, a come to an agreement. And Abner's men traveled all that night through the Arabah and crossed the Jordan. So this is all taking place in a Transjordan section of Israel. And they march, and they come back to the place they came from, which is really kind of hard to pronounce. It's Mahanaim. And Joab returned from the pursuit of Abner, and when he had gathered all the people together, there were missing of David's servants 19 men, besides the brother that was killed by Abner's spear. But the servants of David had killed of Benjamin. Remember, the Benjamites circled around Abner. They had killed 360. And they buried Asahel in the tomb of his father, which is in Bethlehem. So Joab and his men marched all night, and day broke upon them at Hebron. So they're all back in Hebron with David. Abner and his people had gone over across the Jordan to their place, and they are sticking there. So there is frustration, revenge, determination, and there's loss and gain in this. And I feel like we know what happens. That's the stinker of this story, is that we know that David eventually becomes king of Israel. But did you know it takes him 7 years to get to that place where he's king of all of Israel, because of these other outliers out there, things like what Abner has just done? And Ishbaal is an interesting name. We could talk about that for a minute. The word Baal means Lord. And you know that Baal is one of the pagan gods, and they would have worshipped Baal, and that's forbidden. However, in the lingo of the time, this name would mean man of the Lord, man of God. And so Ishbaal is man of the Lord. And but to me, it gives me that little bit of like, because we'll see in later chapters how the prophets of Baal are defeated by Elijah. That's coming up in First Kings. But so there's these other gods out there, the gods that the Philistines worship, and then there's the gods of other groups, the Amalekites, the people around them. They have their what we would call pagan gods. They're not the one true God, the God of Israel. And so, naming your kid similar to that, but back then it would have been seen as just another word for Lord. And then, but looking into it a little bit later, especially post-Babylonian exile situations, you would have seen the word Baal and been like, not good. And so that's maybe a precursor to what's going to happen. He is the son of Saul. Ishbaal is king over these sections of Israel for about 2 years before his reign is over with. And David, though, has this progressive throning of himself. And obviously this thing has been progressing since Samuel anointed him in the middle of the first book. So we're just slowly but surely trying to get to the place where David is now king of Israel. And it's just a slow process. It's not something we would expected, because it seemed like in the beginning they asked for a king. Samuel said, "You don't want a king," and they found Saul, and they got Saul, and Saul was anointed, and he was the king. It sort of seemed like it happened like that. And here's David, anointed way in advance when he's a young boy. He becomes and proves himself as a leader. He parts ways with Saul, and then even after Saul's death, when it really looks like, again, known by not just the Israelites, but the Amalekites and the Philistines. Saul has killed his thousands, but David has killed his 10,000s. It looks like he's going to be the rightful heir, but they're still trying to hold on to this patrilineal situation. Patrilineal meaning that the son of the last king would be the next king. The king is dead, long live the king, kind of thing. So, but no, it's just going to have to be done by military coup, which is kind of what Abner does here, and eventually it's not going to work. But I think that what I'm learning from this is that there's more struggle involved in the things we expect God to do for us. So David has been anointed, and he's looking at being the king for all these years, and he is he's been put off, and now it's going to take him 7 years after Saul's death to become king of Israel. So I hope you will remember to wait upon the Lord. Be patient. Take care.